Hello and welcome to our Electric Avenue podcast. I'm Julius and
Janek.
we are your hosts for today, where we talk about the recent startup interview we did with Electra. First, that you got to know us, I'm Julius, have been working in the EV industry since 5 years, and I'm one of the co-authors of Electric Avenue newsletter together with Yannick.
Yeah, and I've been a product manager in EV charging and been in the industry for about 7 years. And about 1.5 years ago, we started the Electric Avenue newsletter, and now we're starting the podcast.
Perfect. And for those of you who haven't read our Electric Avenue interview with Electra, we definitely recommend you to have a look at it. Today, we talk a little bit about what we personally find quite impressive and also quite interesting, because we also sat down with Julien and have a conversation off the record, and we got to know the team and also a little bit more about their story. And of course, in a condensed newsletter, we weren't able to pack everything into it. So Yannick, tell me, what did you think about Julien and the team? What was interesting for you?
Yeah, maybe first about Electra in general. So Electra is a French startup. I think they're about 4 years old, so quite young. And they're a DC fast charging network that is asset heavy. So they own the stations themselves. And that's the first thing I found really interesting is there's this kind of pure play charging startup that is actually asset heavy. There's not a lot of them out there because most of the companies that actually invest in DC fast charging infrastructure and own the infrastructure are more legacy players like the car companies that got together and founded Ionity, or oil players like BP and Shell and those types of companies. So Electra reminded me a little bit in that sense of Fastnet, which was kind of the original asset-heavy DC charger startup in Europe.
Yeah, and when you talk about asset heavy, just for the ones who haven't been so deep into the numbers yet in the charge point operator business, roughly for one fast charge point, you need to calculate 200,000 euros with not only the hardware for the charger itself, but also the construction, the wiring that you need to do, and also you pay for the land. And talking about getting funding for such startups, you're easily way out of the budget of any venture capital company. But what I found quite interesting, they actually started with a venture capital company. And I think that was also quite interesting how they define themselves, because they said, like, we're infra tech. And that I found quite curious because they sort of made also the bridge in their funding to get those assets into the ground, because they started with actually the technology and just a few stations, but built the software. And then later they got funding from pension funds to really, they have the deep pockets to get really a lot of charge points and assets into the ground.
Yeah, that's something that Julia really emphasized, that they have this tech DNA of actually vertically integrating and doing a lot of the software development. Like the best example is their cloud-based charging station management system, which they do in-house. And then also later bringing on investors that understand the infrastructure game of like long time horizons and, acquiring sites, installing assets, and maintaining them at a good operational level for a really long time.
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think, building a charge point management system, plenty out there yet. I think it's on the one hand quite a Shark Tank if you build only a charge point management system. On their perspective, and when they started, it sort of made sense. What I found quite intriguing was that they kind of combine not only the backend system, but also they have their mobile applications, for example, built by themselves. So they said with this tech DNA, they're able to also get more user feedback and have been having a really big focus on reliability. they were enabled to get like user feedback in quite fast and check in the backend system what is going wrong, and then bringing updates to the charging infrastructure really quick to kind of increase this number. And reliability has been a big topic of big networks, especially in the US, I think, at the last months, years.
Yeah. So I guess they made a strategic choice there in the beginning to build the charging station management system in-house. And it kind of enabled them, I think, to innovate on the product side a little bit. Because their differentiation was to not focus so much on highway fast charging, which traditionally that's, for example, what Fastnet does, right? Or Ionity. And that's initially actually what I thought they did before we talked to Julien, and we learned that I think about 4% of their sites are highway sites. And the rest
it's eight station or 8 locations. I think they have at highways out of 200. So I've personally been to one station at a highway, found it quite impressive. Discovered them this way for me personally.
I remember that from your Tesla Model Y road trip article, right? That's
exactly. A friend of mine, former colleague, told me to go to the station because he knew where I was going. And it was a really big station. It was a canopy. They have had a LED billboard to signal the prices, and then I think it was 10 Alpitronic hyperchargers or 20 charge point, if I could remember correctly. So quite impressive, directly at a French highway station.
But it's not really their focus. Their focus is urban locations or suburban locations, kind of around bigger cities, like near the airport and stuff like that. And the reason was that they wanted to offer urban fast charging for people living in apartments, which is quite common in bigger cities in Europe, but also for kind of fleets. So there's a B2B focus there as well. So taxi fleets going electric, ride-hailing fleets, urban delivery fleets. And they developed some custom features that made it easier for them to serve those customers. And two that Julien called out in the article as well is their fleet partner portal. So they have a dedicated web interface that fleet managers can use, as well as the reservation function.
Let us talk a little bit about the reservation function, because I think I'm not really a big fan of that reservation function, but taking the angle of Julien, how he told about reservation and their B2B fleet customers, that totally made sense for me. So maybe for the people who don't know, how does it work? And I think that's where Electra also showcased how they have been innovating on behalf or for their customer, on the customer needs. They not only took like the reservation function that just the charge point isn't usable anymore for anyone else, but they also made sure that all the users are informed about the reservation when they arrive at the location. So they have, for example, the LED displays illustrating, if you sit in your car, you can easily see that if the charging station is free or occupied, not only when you parked and then got to the station's display, which I found quite neat of a user experience.
So while you pull into the site, you see the LEDs already, and you can, before you pick a spot, already know which ones are reserved and which ones are free. Okay.
Exactly.
Similar to the Mercedes network, right? The Mercedes charging station.
Yeah, Mercedes did it now as well with the LED pillars. But for example, this is, fairly easy, but if it's not there, it's a horrible experience for all the others.
Think about it from the beginning, yeah. Like other networks have tried reservation functions, but then usually it's just written somewhere on the tiny screen on the charging station that you don't see until you've parked, got out, walked up to the station, and then you realize, I have to switch to another spot. I have to repark my car. It's way more of a hassle.
And another thing, if I understood it correctly, unfortunately, I didn't try it in France back then. I think how it works, if you go into the Electra app and then you have your location sharing on, so it can calculate when will you arrive from your current location at the charging station. And I think then they schedule it for a time window, the reservation. So it's not like reserved for all other EV drivers for the whole period. but only a certain time slot. And then it gives you also confidence that once you reach the station, it's actually free for you, but it doesn't block the utilization of the charge point operator.
And I think you have to pay, right? It's not a free reservation.
I'm not sure anymore. I can look that up quickly. Let me check. There's no station yet in Munich, unfortunately, but they, I think, built a station in Austria. So soon I can check that out as well. No, reservations for free, actually,
okay.
as a private customer. Not sure if that's valid also for B2B customers.
Yeah.
But now, coming back to the B2B customer, why is it really important? Imagine you're a taxi driver, and what you basically want is, or you're an entrepreneur, businessman operating a taxi fleet. What you want is a maximum uptime of your taxi fleet. You don't want your drivers to wait for recharging their EVs. So what they do is they build, for example, urban or fast charging hubs close to airports. And then the drivers can, if they, for example, know they will drop off a passenger close to the airport or at the airport, they can actually click and reserve a charging station of Electra. And when they arrive at the station, they have the confidence they can recharge. And that's really important. Then they can recharge for 20 minutes, make a rest, and then go on on their tour. And that way, they don't need to, for example, return to a depot of the taxi business and would lose valuable time.
Yeah.
And they don't have to idle.
And another feature which they have is auto charge. So you can basically simplify the authentication and payment process by registering your car once in the Electra app. And the next time you plug into an Electra station, they save the MAC address of your vehicle in their backend. And then when you plug in from then on going forward at any Electra station, they recognize your car by reading the MAC address over the charging communication through the cable, and then bill your account directly, so you don't have to pull out the app anymore. That really makes it more seamless, more of a Tesla-like experience. And it's nice for fleet customers if you have changing drivers, but the same vehicle that you want to be built the same account. You don't have to enable each driver for payment, but the vehicle itself is enabled.
Yeah. It's a tricky discussion, I think, with the auto charge functionality when it comes to security. However, they also said they're not, let's say, close to plug and charge, as far as I remembered. Having like the non-EV enthusiasts in mind, especially if you want to kind of get your drivers into electric vehicles, I think it definitely eases this transition. It just takes out a lot of worry.
I think it's a very pragmatic solution. That's a good intermediate solution.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the long-term solution, but I would rather have it exist as a possibility for customers, especially if the risk is not put on the customer, but if the CPO takes the risk.
Yeah, and to be fair, Electra is not the first one who has introduced auto charge. There has been plenty of other operators. I think in Europe there's Fastnet, for example, or ENBW with the Mobility Plus app that is quite famous. And I think also in the US you have players like EVgo, if I remember correctly, that have launched. Yeah. So it's not uniquely new, but if you like take Electra, they started in 2021. They've implemented in their own system and that showcase how progressive and fast they've been able to build up their systems and get it running. What do you think about the general, let's say, here we have a new incumbent coming in and taking the existing technology. They have been deploying a lot of the Alpitronic hyperchargers, I think, with 300 or now 400 kilowatt. And so fast charging technology is not new. They didn't develop that in-house and now just applied in a different environment, the urban space, where we traditionally have rather AC charging. So is it now a competition? Do you think it's complementary? What is your opinion?
I think it's complementary because, yeah, for example, as a taxi driver, you don't have all day standing at a curbside to get your car recharged. You need that quick charge during your lunch break or something like that, or a coffee break. But then there's other people that live in apartments that are probably okay just charging curbside overnight. That's what I did when I lived in Munich, and it was a pretty easy experience.
Yeah, I think the biggest benefit to the let's say, commercial customers is, personally, I have the perception that fast charging is much more reliable when it comes to the uptime of the charge itself, as well as the availability. So with AC charging, especially curbside charging, many times the chargers are blocked by combustion engine vehicles because it's also suitable parking spots.
Mm-hmm.
And the hurdle to really block a fast charging station is, I think, much higher for the people. Also, because they are visibly marked more appealing, or slash, it's not viewed so much as a parking spot. So I think the reliability point is really important. Even so, maybe AC charging is a little bit more convenient, mostly when it comes to, you can park your car, return later, and I get it. While it's not worthwhile to go too far away from the charging station when you do fast charging.
Yeah. In inner city, AC charging does not exist in the US yet that much. There are some companies doing curbside charging now in New York. But for the most part in the cities, like in San Diego where I live, the AC chargers are at businesses where you usually only stay there for 1 or 2 hours. So like a restaurant or a supermarket. So you don't really get a full charge. It's more like snack charging.
Yeah.
So if you actually do a lot of driving during the week and you don't have home or apartment charging, you need to stop at an urban fast charger once a week or so, and do a fast charge. It's probably not enough to only do it, at the supermarket and stuff like that. That was my experience when I had my Kia Niro EV in San Diego, and I didn't have any charging at home. But once a week, I had to go to an Electrify America or EVgo station and do a full charge, even with intermediary like snack charging.
I think it's quite interesting from a business model perspective if we break it down, because what I would expect in their data that they can see is a pattern, that there are certain customer groups that are coming on a recurring base to probably even the same station. So once they have locked in a certain customer group, they can really achieve customer loyalty, because they will just rely on the daily driving behavior and probably integrate it into their routes and behavior.
Yep.
I think that makes it quite interesting. Versus in fast charging stations, you have these like travel peak times, and then you have probably a high utilization. While here, you can probably get a quite constant utilization from a certain customer group.
Yep. What did you think about the tools that they use that they call out in the article? Any thoughts on those?
I haven't. Maybe for the ones who haven't read yet, they used one procurement management tool, Pre-Coro. I haven't heard that one.
Yeah,
then look, HubSpot as a CM tool, quite well known, especially for people that listen to podcasts, because they are a big sponsor of many episodes or podcasts that I'm listening to. And what I found quite interesting is the tool Site Tracker. It's a tool to track the rollout of the charging stations. I think it's a generic use case. So the use cases Site Tracker illustrates on the website is, for example, solar PV projects.
Mm-hmm.
And that sound quite handy. They use it a lot. Any thoughts? Besides, they use Snowflake and Notion.
Yeah, I would be interested looking into Precoro more and understanding what are the benefits of it, what are the use cases. HubSpot, I think, makes sense. I've never worked with it. I've worked with like Salesforce before and Pipedrive as CRMs. But like you said, HubSpot is very popular. And then I think it's cool that they use Notion internally as a knowledge management tool. I always like companies that have a good internal knowledge management tool, but whether that's Confluence or Notion or something like that. And then I thought it was interesting that he said in terms of a business he wishes someone else would build that would make their job easier. He called out a modern and agile accounting tool handling multi-companies. Yeah.
That's maybe a call for all the entrepreneurs out there who have been looking into problems that are worthwhile solving. Not maybe EV charging specific here, but who builds the new SAP or Oracle system that is maybe more appealing to innovative and agile companies like Electra.
Yeah, I would be curious what their specific use cases are that they have trouble handling with other accounting tools. I mean, there is a lot of complexity in EV charging inherently because you have a lot of taxes involved on the energy that you buy and which country you buy it from, as well as which country you sell it in, which station you sell it on, and where the driver is from that you sell to. So that, yeah, maybe causes some issues. And then also you have, operations in so many different countries across Europe and transactions and all of them.
And don't forget all the and they have their end customers / business customers, and then additional they have all the e-mobility service providers and the roaming agreements. They all need to get an invoice for charging sessions of their drivers that have happened at Electra stations.
Yep.
Yeah,
on the topic of roaming, did you see that there was this startup called Enapi, which is starting essentially a new EV charging roaming platform in Europe, and they announced that Electra would be one of the launch charge point operators.
Yeah, I actually have talked to the founders quite recently. What was quite interesting. Maybe they come into one of our set interviews. What I think their vision is to build this base layer of connectivity for roaming. So that means data exchange between charge point operators and mobility service providers, basically for free. And then on top of that, building services, as I understood it. So it's a little bit of an alternative to the central roaming hubs that we have seen establishing themselves.
That was cool and interesting to see Electra kind of trying it out at launch, and I'm curious how that will go. Anything else on the article?
I found it quite interesting how in the end he dropped their values. So it's 3 core values: passion, simplicity, and boldness. And all across the interview, I've seen them being resembled. Especially the topic of simplicity is much underrated, I think, today, especially in EV charging, because there's just so much to do. He was really clear that their focus is DC charging in urban environments, and it seems like, at least until today, they've really been able to create that focus and position themselves there and differentiate among competitors.
Yeah, I agree. That's important, and it's cool to see. But I think a lot of the companies that have been in this industry for a while haven't, from the outside, it looks like they have a focus because they had to evolve so much because, I don't know, either EVs weren't available as much in the market yet, so they had to just do something to stay alive. Like a famous example is the Mobility House selling home charging stations online when really they wanted to do vehicle to grid and bidirectional charging in the beginning. Or there are a lot of other companies where they start out doing home wall box installations just to like generate revenue, and then they pivot into all kinds of other things. And then in the end, you have a company that does a lot of different things, but the different divisions grew over like 10 years because Electra has been so new that they kind of entered the market at a point where it was already big enough that you could focus on one vertical.
That's true. Still, he also said that if what would happen or what needs to happen if the company would be failing, and he said like the EVs and the new vehicle sales is really one of their big metrics they need to monitor. If the EVs are not coming fast enough, I think this whole infrastructure investment game is really about to fail. So there's a strong lever to the OEMs and their transition to electric vehicles, and also, of course, to the newcomers. So now we have seen more announcements from China coming to Europe, especially, that could decide over their success.
Yep. Another challenge he called out was the competition for sites. Like he said specifically, they were a young startup and they needed to compete on land acquisition deals with giant companies like Total, the gas station chain, or French utilities like EDF, or automotive players like Tesla and Ionity.
But I think it's quite interesting because this will now, we have now fast charging stations, the big hubs. The first ones were built in 2018. I think Ionity started that one in Europe. In the US, it was at the same time Electrify America, and give those sites another 4 years. So probably in 3 years, they start to reissue the tenders for those sites because they will never have exclusivity for a lifetime, only if they bought the land. Rarely they did. Yeah. So like the dice are rolled again in 3 years. And then everybody competes against each other for the same sites. And the landlords, they will know what they can get from those, or they have the tenders, and basically the bid will decide. So it's really a hard game for Electra. They need a lot of funding. Same do the others, the same funding the other needs to compete on those sites. And ultimately, I think we will also see now more, I guess so, more companies trying to acquire strategic sites to save this strategic competitive advantage.
Yeah.
The sites.
I think it will be important what kind of big deals you have with site partners, like ENBW has a deal with DM, the drugstore chain in Germany, or in the US, Mercedes just signed a deal with Buc-ee's, a gas station convenience store chain in parts of the US. Those deals can get you really good access to really premium sites, but they will probably be expensive the more these companies become aware of what they can charge for access to their sites.
The big question remains, are those retailers really the owners of these sites? Or are there other investment funds owning those sites, actually, the retail sites, and leasing that to the retailers? And also seeing that window of opportunity for separating the charging business on the premise and the parking spots of the retailer, and also kind of getting the cash from that business stream.
Yeah, I think it depends, but if there's separate companies, then it becomes more difficult to negotiate those agreements. Cool.
Cool.
Anything else to touch on?
I think it was a quite interesting talk we have had there with Electra. I have nothing to add for now. I'm curious about upcoming further startup interviews, and I'm having an eye on Electra.
Yep. Agreed. It'll be interesting to see them expanding now into a lot of other European countries. We know some people that joined their team in Germany, and we'll be following along and keeping you all posted.
Yeah.
Cool.
Let's make the pod.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.